Hey there, podcasting badasses. It's Sober Steve, the podcast guy, here with another tune-up episode of Podcasting Badass. This is your chance to hear me coach an existing podcaster who's been podcasting already for a little while, isn't seeing the results they're looking for, and we brainstorm ways that they can tune up their podcast and help it grow. This is a interesting dynamic because this is a friend of mine, Dr. Dallas Bragg, that I had a tune-up with last week. And it was always interesting giving a friend advice that you've seen built a podcast the entire time, thinking to yourself, oh, if he was a client, I would tell him to do this or that. But knowing that he was a friend and that that's not my place. And then finally getting the chance to talk to him about some of those things. As I get to share some of my ideas with Dallas, not only will we be talking about some of the basics of search engine optimization when it comes to your title and title extension for your podcast, but also diving into the different formats and styles of episodes that you can have in addition to just the typical interview style format. I hope you enjoy this information and make sure to follow me on Instagram at Podcasting Badass for more tips and tricks all week long. And I look forward to seeing you Monday for another solo episode of Podcasting Badass. Enjoy this great tune-up with Dr. Dallas Bragg. It's Steve here with Dr. Dallas Bragg from the AfterMeth Podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to be here for a tune-up because we are podcasting buddies, and it'll be interesting giving someone I consider a mentor in social media like some advice about the podcasting side of things, because our journeys kind of started differently, but they ended up, or they're in similar paths right now. So tell me about your podcast and what it's about and all that.
Well, the podcast is called The AfterMeth, which is a play on words because we're talking to men who have struggling with or have recovered from crystal meth. So it's the life after meth, right? And so I started this originally because I wanted to reach out to families and loved ones of crystal meth addicts, because in honor of my mom, because when I became a crystal meth addict, she had no idea of the nuances that belong to a gay man doing crystal meth, because it's a whole different world than anybody else doing crystal meth, and it's a whole different world than any other drug. And so I wanted to create a repository of resources for family members, loved ones to say, oh, I see this sign, I see that sign, this is a do, this is a don't, because my mom did a lot of don'ts, but she didn't know. But it's turned into a teaching platform, what I am using it for. During the podcast, I'll stop and say, okay, underscore this is a learning point. But, because what I'm seeing is the audience is a lot of men who are trying to get over this drug and get past it. And so we also offer a study guide with it each week too, journal questions and reflective questions. So that's the premise of it.
Yeah, excellent. And I mean, it is such an important resource for the community. And I definitely think that you have an excellent niche that you found, which, and you know who your target audience is, of like who the ideal listener is. And that's very important as you're getting started, and you already are doing great. But I definitely, with the AfterMeth podcast, I kind of previewed with you beforehand, but there's some room to grow starting in terms of how people find you. Because right now, where do you think most of your listeners are coming from when they find you? Is it through your social media activity or
TikTok? TikTok. That's where most people are finding me. And they're mostly listening on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. I think when I look around, I mean, there's some coming off my website. There's some coming off Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. But for the most part, it's people from TikTok who see me. And then I also, probably getting too far into it, but when people comment on my TikTok videos, I will reply a lot and say, have you seen my podcast? And so I that's been driving some traffic there too.
Yeah. And anyone listening who feels overwhelmed by the concept of social media, I'm telling you, even if you're not in recovery for crystal meth or been affected by it, give Dallas a follow just to see, because like you do awesome at social media. I could have no notes for it because you're posting regularly, your content is engaging, it's switched up with the formula. So it's not just reels or just static posts like you do. When I was in my courses to be really good at this and train other people how to be really good at this, everything in the social media course, I was like, Dallas does all this. I wonder if he took this course, because you do great at that. But as much as we love your clever name, which is perfect, because the AfterMeth podcast, like it's perfect.
Yeah.
The issue is that new people, when they find you, might have a difficulty if they don't already know you from your amazing social media account. Because what's some of the struggles you shared, even that you were aware that it's difficult sometimes to find it?
It is. If you type in AfterMeth, it autocorrects whatever you're typing, usually mobile device, it autocorrects to Aftermath. And so when you type in Aftermath, my podcast is nowhere to be found. So I have heard back from people, especially those who maybe are not as technologically advanced as others, that I can't find it, and then people ask, well, where is it? So what I have been doing is sending them to the website. So I say aftermeth.net. And so that way, you can listen to it on the page, or there's links to the other modalities. So that's kind of been my workaround. I know that's not sustainable, but instead of going through, make sure you don't let it autocorrect, and make sure you do this and make sure you do that. I just said, just go aftermeth.net. So,
Yeah, and the website certainly helps build up like your SEO on things like the internet as well, because there's a lot more words, because I see like you post your blogs and like you post so much out there. But in terms of the way that like there's three real factors in terms of SEO, in terms of podcasting.
Okay.
The first one is the podcast names. So if what people are searching for in the search bar of those words are in the name of the podcast, you're more likely to be like number one, number two, like top 5 or 6 result. And it's not always a race to be number one, because as long as you're in that top results where everyone gets to see your pictures, then it becomes a battle of the pictures. But we want to be in the top results from keywords being in your title. And I'm telling you right now, you don't have to change Aftermath. You can keep it a compound word. You can keep it clever, beautiful, perfect. And in all your even cover art and everything, you can still always just call it the AfterMeth Podcast. But I would highly recommend adding a title extension afterward in the podcast in Buzzsprout, where it's AfterMeth, or like the AfterMeth Podcast : and then that's where you fill it with keywords like crystal meth, like a podcast about crystal meth, or maybe even after separately, then AfterMeth, because they're compound words in the title. So something like life after crystal meth.
Okay.
And that way you have and even maybe add crystal meth amphetamines, even though I don't always hear that afterwards, but that way if someone even searches for amphetamines and isn't searching for crystal meth, your podcast will still show up. But adding word on afterwards for your title, even if you're not changing your branding or messaging or the way you talk about it, making it so that they're in the title makes it so that when people search it, it'll show up. So you might just start getting, while you're asleep, people like searching for Crystal Meth Podcast and find you. And then like by the time that you wake up in the morning for your gym routine, they'll have already listened to all your episodes.
I have some questions on that. Would you suggest I put LGBTQ in the title extension? Because it is geared toward gay men.
If it's geared towards gay men, I would put gay men in there. But if your ideal listener, who also, well, spoiler alert for later, we'll get to, but they should also be your ideal customer.
Right.
Coach.
right.
Like your ideal customer name should be in your podcast, and you can add a plus or and beyond or something if you're worried about leaving out the women who want to come on or the straight men who want to come on. But like make it so that if gay men are searching crystal meth gay, crystal meth men, that like those types of things, you want them to be able to find your podcast as easily as they can, especially being about something like that, where when they need that help and resource, you got to catch them right then and there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a good point about writing out methamphetamine. Some of my videos on TikTok have been picked up because sometimes the ones that do really well, TikTok picks up and puts on a search field for you. And there's a couple of it's put in the crystal search field. So it's lumped in with all of these like metaphysical crystal videos. Yeah.
Which isn't too far off from your brand at times. Now, in terms of one concern you also previously stated was running out of like kind of topics or switching things up and keeping things fresh. So what have been some ideas or concepts you've thought of for switching it out?
The only thing I have thought of is as I'm going along, I'm approaching more sex therapists and gay therapists, gay counselors, so I'm trying to get credible people in, but it's not exactly crystal meth related, but it's more of taking care of yourself or life after sobriety or sex after sobriety, stuff like that. So I guess the information isn't specifically for meth addicts, but it is for the LGBTQ population. So that's where I've been going lately to try to mix it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I could definitely understand how with a podcast that's about crystal meth and its effect, like on gay people particularly, a lot of it is like, what do I do afterward? Have you gotten a client from the podcast yet?
Good question. I would say yes, two actually. Well, I can't tell if they're from my TikTok or my podcast because they
blend.
and so I would say that it definitely helped establish my credibility in getting the last two clients that I have.
Yeah. What I would recommend, especially being that the third kind of topic that we were going to talk about today was monetization as well, is that as much as it's great building brand new communities like Patreon, you built a lot of communities already that you were working to keep active. You have a lot going on. You're on a lot of social media accounts.
I do.
I don't think that you're at the point now where making a whole new community might be worth the $5 to $10 to $20 a month people might be pledging to join something like that. So what I would recommend to increase your monetization is to be able, like, in addition to the interviews with the experts that are always important and get you connected to awesome, amazing people you might not have ever met, mix it in where you're getting to do some coaching style episodes where you're giving free coaching advice to someone because a lot of times as coaches, the biggest obstacle that we have with getting new clients is that they don't know what to expect from coaching. And so if you were to offer to your listeners or to your TikTok people, come on my podcast for a free coaching session to see what it's like working with me, getting coached with me, and use that as an episode. That way, if they end up working with you, that's fabulous and you'll help change their lives for the better. I know you will. But even if they don't, you have an episode where people that will listen will then get to learn what it's like going through your process, and they'll be drawn to that if they were meant to be drawn to that a lot quicker, being able to have that mysticism of what it is that you do dispel. So wins for everyone, but then it'll also help you in the end because then they'll be like, okay, that's what it's like. Then here's my money.
I thank you for that. Yeah.
So if someone is interested in finding you or connecting with you, how would they do that?
Well, the website is AfterMeth. I have my own website, drdallasbragg.com, and then Dr. Dallas Bragg on all social media that you could think of. X, Facebook, Twitter, or I already said Twitter. X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. What'd I miss?
LinkedIn.
Yep, that's where you can find me. And of course, AfterMeth Podcast hopefully will be coming up on your search engine pretty soon.
Yes, I'm sure it will. With the title extension, you'll be wonders and you'll be at the top of everyone's third part.
Yay.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks for listening to another episode, Podcasting Badasses.